They pushed her too far. Every day, Jennifer walked the halls in silence, swallowing the pain, hiding the bruises. But when one cruel prank goes too far, everything changes. Secrets unravel, alliances break, and the school will never be the same. Will she rise? Or will she break? This isn't just another bully story. It's a battle for survival. Are you ready for the truth? Before we venture into the story in details, and revealing the twists and tragedies of Jennifer's bully experience in the school and beyond, please consider subscribing to this channel as a means of support. Turn on the bell notification button for more interesting and amazing videos of this kind. Thank you. Jennifer, or as everyone called her, Big Jenny, was a different kind of girl at school. She didn't look like the others. While many of the students wore fancy clothes and spoke with the confidence of wealth, Jennifer wore simple clothes and spoke with the humble tone of a mechanic's daughter. Her father worked hard in the dusty garage, fixing cars and making sure the family had enough to eat. Jennifer didn't mind being different, but the other kids did. Every day at school, she was teased and bullied. The loudest and cruelest bully was Isabella. She was the school's star, rich, popular, and always looking for someone to bring down. Jennifer became her favorite target. "Why are you even here?" Isabella would shout at her, laughing as her friends joined in. "You don't belong in this school. You're just a poor mechanic's daughter. You don't fit in with us." Jennifer's heart would sink, but she tried not to cry. She knew they didn't understand her. They didn't know how hard her father worked to send her to that school, hoping she would get a chance to have a better future. One day, things went too far. During lunch, as Jennifer was walking across the schoolyard, Isabella and her friends were waiting for her. She didn't know what was coming, but she was about to find out. Without warning, Isabella grabbed a bucket full of something smelly and began to pour it all over Jennifer. "This is what you deserve," she said, laughing with her friends. "You're nothing but a fat, poor girl who doesn't belong here." Jennifer stood frozen, feeling the cold, disgusting mess soaking into her clothes. Her classmates around her laughed and pointed. Jennifer wanted to disappear. She wanted to run away and never come back. But then, she thought of her father, who worked tirelessly every day to send her to this school. Jennifer's face burned with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she lifted her head and with all the strength she could gather, she said, "I may be different, but I am strong. I am more than what you think of me. I don't need your approval to be proud of who I am." Jennifer, covered in the mess they had thrown at her, turned and walked away. She didn't need to stay there any longer. When Jennifer got home that day, she felt like a huge weight was pressing down on her chest. She had managed to keep her tears in check until she reached the front door. As soon as she walked into the house, she couldn't hold it anymore. The tears streamed down her face, and her father, who was busy fixing a car in the garage, quickly noticed. "Jennifer, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Jennifer wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and tried to speak, but the words got stuck in her throat. Finally, she managed to choke out, "I don't want to go back to school, Daddy. They bullied me again." Isabella and her friends, they poured something on me. I don't belong there. I can't take it anymore. Her father set down his tools and walked over to her, his hands warm and gentle as he cupped her face. "Jennifer, my dear, I know it's hard. I know they're treating you badly, and it hurts me to see you go through this. But you mustn't give up. You are strong, and you are more than they can ever understand." Jennifer shook her head. "But they keep saying I don't belong. They keep making fun of me. I'm not like them, Daddy. I will never be like them." Her father smiled softly, though there was sadness in his eyes. "You don't have to be like them. You are special in your own way, and that is enough. Don't let their words tear you down. You are going to school because you deserve an education, and no one can take that from you. They may try to hurt you with their words, but you have to rise above them. Jennifer sniffled, still not fully convinced. What if it doesn't get better? What if they keep bullying me? Then we'll fight back, her father said firmly. Not with violence or anger, but with your strength. And if they continue, you report it to someone who can help you. Don't stay quiet, Jennifer. You have a voice, and it matters. Jennifer felt comforted by her father's words, but she still wasn't sure if she could go back to school. The next day she was afraid, but her father's encouragement gave her the courage she needed to at least try. Okay, Daddy. I'll go back. But I'll tell my teacher. I'll tell her what's been happening. Her father nodded and gave her a warm hug. Good. I'm proud of you. Always. Remember, you are my brave daughter, and nothing can change that. The next morning, Jennifer went to school with a heavy heart. She was still nervous, still scared of what might happen, but she knew she had to try. She found herself walking slowly to her classroom, her hands shaking in her pockets. When she reached the door, she took a deep breath and walked inside. As she entered, her teacher, Mrs. Johnson, was sitting at her desk, grading papers. Jennifer hesitated for a moment before she approached her. Excuse me, Mrs. Johnson, Jennifer began, her voice quiet but firm. I need to talk to you about something. Mrs. Johnson looked up from her papers with a distracted expression. Yes, Jennifer, what is it? Jennifer gathered her courage, her heart pounding in her chest. Some students have been bullying me, Isabella, and her friends keep teasing me, calling me names. And yesterday they poured something on me. They said I don't belong here because I'm not rich like them. I don't know what to do. Mrs. Johnson stared at her for a moment, her expression unreadable. Jennifer, I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Maybe they were just joking. You know how teenagers can be. She went back to her papers without saying much more. Jennifer felt her stomach drop. She had expected a little more support, but instead, Mrs. Johnson seemed to dismiss her. But Mrs. Johnson, it wasn't a joke, Jennifer said, trying to hold back more tears. It really hurt. Please, you have to do something. It's not right. Mrs. Johnson sighed, clearly annoyed. Jennifer, I'm very busy right now. Maybe you should try to ignore them. I'm sure it will pass. Just focus on your studies and stay away from those girls. Jennifer stood there, shocked and disappointed. She had hoped for understanding, for help, but it seemed like Mrs. Johnson wasn't going to do anything. With a heavy heart, Jennifer turned and walked out of the classroom. The next day, Jennifer tried to keep her head down at school. She wanted to avoid Isabella and her friends at all costs. But Isabella had other plans. She had a new way to embarrass her, and she wasn't going to stop until she had done it. During lunch, Isabella and her gang spotted Jennifer walking down the hallway. She was holding her books close to her chest, trying to stay unnoticed. But Isabella smiled and whispered something to her friends. They laughed and followed her as she walked toward her. Hey, Big Jennifer, Isabella shouted, his voice echoing down the hall. A few students turned to watch. Jennifer froze in her tracks. She didn't want trouble, but she could feel it coming. Where are you running to, mechanic's daughter? Isabella sneered, stepping in front of her. His friends formed a circle around them, blocking her path. Jennifer didn't say anything. She just kept her eyes on the ground, hoping he'd leave her alone. Not going to talk, huh? Isabella teased. Well, don't worry. I brought you a little gift. Jennifer looked up just in time to see Isabella holding a plastic bottle. Before she could react, she poured the liquid over her head. It was warm. It smelled awful. It was urine. The hallway, filled with gasps and laughter. Some students covered their mouths in shock, while others giggled nervously. Jennifer stood frozen as the liquid dripped down her hair and onto her clothes. She felt every stare, every laugh, like a knife cutting into her. Isabella tossed the empty bottle on the floor and laughed. "Now you smell like where you belong, with the trash," he said, his voice full of cruelty. Jennifer couldn't hold back her tears anymore. She turned and ran. She didn't know where she was going. She just needed to get away. Her heart felt like it was breaking, and the laughter ringing in her ears made her want to disappear. She found an empty corner near the janitor's closet and slid to the floor. She hugged her knees to her chest and let the tears flow. She cried so hard her whole body shook. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "Why do they hate me? Why do they treat me like this?" She thought of her dad, how he always told her to stay strong. But right now, she didn't feel strong. She felt small and worthless. As she sat there, lost in her sadness, she heard a soft voice. "Jennifer." She looked up and saw Mrs. Peter, the school counselor, standing there. Mrs. Peter had heard someone crying and came to see what was wrong. Her face was full of concern. "What happened, Jennifer?" Mrs. Peter asked gently, kneeling next to her. Jennifer hesitated at first, but then everything came pouring out. She told Mrs. Peter about Isabella, the bullying, and how he had just poured urine on her. She told her how the teacher didn't believe her when she tried to report it before. Mrs. Peter listened carefully, her face growing more serious with each word. When Jennifer finished, Mrs. Peter put a hand on her shoulder. "Jennifer, I am so sorry this happened to you. This is not okay, and you don't deserve this. You are not the problem. They are." Jennifer sniffled, her voice shaking. "But no one cares. The teacher didn't care when I told her." "Well, I care," Mrs. Peter said firmly, "and I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again." She helped Jennifer to her feet and walked her to her office. Jennifer felt shaky and embarrassed, but Mrs. Peter's kindness gave her a small sense of hope. Once in the office, Mrs. Peter gave Jennifer a towel to clean herself and a cup of water to drink. Then she picked up the phone. Jennifer watched as Mrs. Peter called the principal. Her voice was calm but serious as she explained everything that had happened. Jennifer couldn't hear what the principal said, but Mrs. Peter nodded firmly. Suddenly, Mrs. Peter's expression darkened as she listened to the principal on the other end of the phone. Jennifer sat in the chair across from her, nervously wiping her tears with a tissue. She could see Mrs. Peter frowning, her grip tightening on the phone as the conversation went on. "But sir," Mrs. Peter said firmly, "this is unacceptable behavior. A student has been humiliated." The principal's next words were slow and cold. "Tell her she can find another school if she's unhappy here. Isabella's father has always supported this institution. He is the reason we have new classrooms and sports facilities. He ensures our programs are well funded. We cannot afford to lose his sponsorship because of one girl complaining about bullying. Jennifer doesn't belong here anyway, does she? Let her father send her somewhere else." Mrs. Peter froze, her jaw tightening. Jennifer, who had been listening anxiously, felt her heart sink to her stomach. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they weren't just from sadness. They were from anger. Was her life really worth so little to these people? Did money mean more than her pain? "Sir, this isn't about sponsorship," Mrs. Peter said, her voice low and trembling with frustration. "This is about doing what's right." The principal interrupted once more, his voice sharp and final. "Enough. I've made my decision. Drop it, Mrs. Peter. Tell her father to find her a different school if he can't handle this one. Good day." Before Mrs. Peter could respond, the line went dead. The principal had hung up. For a moment, the office was silent. Jennifer sat there, her chest rising and falling as she tried to keep herself from breaking down completely. Mrs. Peter placed the phone back on its receiver with a shaky hand. She looked at Jennifer, her eyes filled with sadness and apology. Jennifer, Mrs. Peter began. But Jennifer didn't wait to hear the rest. She stood up abruptly, her chair screeching against the floor. "So that's it," Jennifer said, her voice trembling. "I'm supposed to just leave because I'm not rich enough to matter?" "Jennifer, please sit down," Mrs. Peter pleaded. "I didn't agree with him. I'm going to figure something out." Jennifer shook her head, her tears spilling freely now. "What's the point? No one cares. No one ever cared." Her voice cracked, and she ran out of the office, ignoring Mrs. Peter's calls for her to come back. She didn't stop running until she was outside the school gates. The cold wind stung her cheeks, but she didn't care. She just needed to get away, to escape the weight pressing down on her chest. As she walked home, her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, hurt, betrayal. How could the school, the very place meant to protect and nurture her, be so cold and heartless? She thought of Isabella's smile, her cruel laughter, and how untouchable she seemed. No one could stand up to her because of her father's power and influence. By the time she reached her house, Jennifer was shaking, partly from the cold and partly from the storm raging inside her. She opened the door to find her father working on an old car engine in their small garage. His hands were covered in grease, and he was humming a soft tune, completely unaware of the pain his daughter was carrying. When he saw her, his smile faded. "Jennifer, what happened?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. He could see the tears in her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped as if the weight of the world was on them. Jennifer couldn't hold it in anymore. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "I can't go back, Daddy," she cried. "I can't. They poured urine on me. They laughed at me. And the principal said, he said I don't belong there because I'm not rich like them." Her father's arms tightened around her, his face hardening as she spoke. He didn't interrupt her, letting her pour out everything. The bullying, the principal's words, the feeling of being worthless. When she finished, her father took a deep breath. "Jennifer," he said softly, pulling back to look into her tear-streaked face. "You're my daughter. You're strong, and no amount of money or power can take away your worth. I'm proud of you, and no one, not Isabella, not her father, not that principal, can change that." "But I can't do it, Daddy," she whispered. "I can't face them anymore." Her father's eyes filled with both pain and determination. "You won't have to face them alone, Jennifer. We're going to fight this. I don't know how yet, but I won't let them win." The next day at school, Jennifer went to the library during lunch. She sat in a corner, trying to stay away from everyone. She felt sad and tired from all the bullying. She opened a book trying to read. Within a few minutes, Isabella came into the library. She spotted Jennifer sitting alone and walked straight to her. This time, Isabella was alone. "Hey, idiot. Look up, who's here?" Isabella said, with a sneer as she sat across from Jennifer. Jennifer didn't look up. She didn't want to talk to her. "You think you can hide in here?" Isabella continued. "You're such a loser, big Jennifer, ugly, stupid and poor person like you. In fact, what's a mechanic's daughter doing in this school in the first place? Anyway, you don't belong here," she spouted. Jennifer clenched her fists under the table, but she didn't say a word. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her upset. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Isabella yelled, slamming her hand on the table. Jennifer flinched and slowly looked up at her. "I'm not going to stop, you know," Isabella said, her eyes cold. "You're going to leave this school one way or another. You have to pay for what your miserable father did to my mother." Jennifer stared at her, confused. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. Isabella leaned back in her chair, folding her arms across his chest. "Oh, you don't know," she said with a cruel laugh. "You really don't know. Your father's such a coward, he didn't even tell you the truth." "Tell me what?" Jennifer demanded, her voice louder now. She was scared, but she needed answers. "What did my daddy do to your mother?" Isabella's smirk disappeared, replaced by a look of pure hatred. Go and ask your useless, pathetic father about a woman named Olivia, she hissed. Ask him what he did to her. Then maybe you'll understand why I hate you and why I will never stop until you're gone. Jennifer's heart raced as Isabella stood up, towering over her. She leaned down, her face inches from hers. You're just as pathetic as he is, she said, her voice dripping with disgust. Go home and ask, you foolish girl. With that, Isabella turned and walked away, leaving Jennifer frozen in her seat. The library was silent again, but inside Jennifer's head, it felt like a storm was raging. Her mind was spinning. Who was Olivia? What could her dad had done to Isabella's mother? Why hadn't he told her anything about this? Jennifer's chest tightened as tears filled her eyes. She couldn't understand why Isabella hated her so much, and now he had dropped a bombshell that made everything even more confusing. She grabbed her bag and left the library, unable to sit still any longer. The rest of the school day passed in a blur. Jennifer couldn't focus in class, couldn't eat during lunch, couldn't think about anything other than Isabella's words. By the time the final bell rang, she felt like she was carrying a mountain on her shoulders. When she got home, her dad was in the garage, working on a car as usual. Jennifer stood in the doorway, watching him for a moment. She didn't know how to bring it up, but she knew she had to. She needed answers. Daddy, she called softly. Her father looked up and smiled, but his smile faded when he saw her face. What's wrong, Jennifer? He asked, setting down his tools. Jennifer hesitated, clutching her bag. I need to ask you something, she said. Of course, what is it? Her father asked, wiping his hands. Who is Olivia? Jennifer demanded. And what happened between you and Isabella's mother? Her father froze. The color drained from his face, and he stared at her in shock. Where did you hear that name? He asked, his voice low. Isabella, Jennifer said. She said you did something to her mother. She said that's why she hates me. Her father let out a deep sigh and looked down at the ground. He seemed to be searching for the right words to say. Jennifer waited anxiously, her heart beating fast. Jennifer, he began slowly, Olivia was a woman I knew a long time ago. She liked me back then. She thought we would end up together, but I never felt the same way about her. Jennifer blinked in surprise. You didn't love her? She asked. Her father shook his head firmly. No, Jennifer, I didn't. I tried to make that clear to her, but she refused to let go of the idea. I met your mother later, and I fell in love with her. We got married, and Olivia didn't take it well. Jennifer tilted her head, confused. She was angry because you married my mother? Yes, her father said with a small, bitter smile. She felt like I betrayed her, but there was never anything between us. I tried to explain that, but she wouldn't listen. She hated me after that, I guess. She told her daughter, Isabella, about it, and now she's taking out her anger on you. Jennifer frowned. So Isabella is bullying me because her mother liked you? That's ridiculous, she exclaimed. They must be really foolish to think this is a good reason to treat me like this. Her father gave her a sad look. I know it doesn't make sense, Jennifer, but some people hold on to anger and bitterness for years, and they pass it on to their children. Isabella probably doesn't even fully understand why she's doing this. She's just repeating what her mother told her. Jennifer sat down on an old chair in the corner of the garage, shaking her head in disbelief. This is so unfair, she muttered. Why should I suffer for something that happened before I was even born? Her father came closer and knelt in front of her, placing his hands gently on her shoulders. Listen to me, Jennifer, he said softly. you need to stop worrying about Isabella and her mother. Don't let their bitterness ruin your life. Look at you. You've been so stressed. You're getting slimmer by the day. It's not healthy, my child. Jennifer's eyes widened. Slimmer? She asked. Yes, her father said with concern. You're not eating properly, and you're always worrying. I can see it in your face. Jennifer, you've been through so much, but you need to be strong. Don't let them in. Don't let them break you. Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes, but this time, they weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of relief and love for her father, who always tried to protect her. The next day, Jennifer walked into her classroom with her head held a little higher. Her father's words from the night before echoed in her mind. Be strong, Jennifer. Don't let them win. She tried to focus on her books, but her heart still felt heavy. She knew Isabella wouldn't leave her alone. Sure enough, just as the bell rang for the first lesson, Isabella walked into the classroom with her usual smug look. He spotted Jennifer sitting quietly in the corner and smiled. He walked straight up to her desk, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Well, look who we have here, she said mockingly. The poor daughter of a foolish mechanic. I'm sure you went home and asked your father about Olivia. Now that you know the truth, what are you going to do? Cry some more? The class burst into soft laughter, and Jennifer felt her cheeks burn, but this time, something inside her snapped. She had had enough. She wouldn't let her walk all over her anymore. Jennifer stood up, her eyes blazing with determination. You're right, Isabella, she said loudly, her voice shaking with anger. I did ask my father, and you know what he told me? He told me your mother is still holding on to a rejection from years ago. Do you know what that means? It means my father is hot cake. He's a real man, unlike your weak, foolish father. Isabella glanced around the classroom, taking in the mocking smiles and the roaring laughter. Unable to withstand the humiliation, she spun on her heel and stormed out without uttering a word. Jennifer sank back into her seat, her heart still pounding. The echoes of her classmates' cheers and laughter filled the room, but for once, she felt a strange sense of relief. She had finally stood up for herself, and it felt good. As the noise died down, a few students approached her. That was incredible, Jennifer, one of them said, grinning. I've never seen Isabella look so embarrassed. Yeah, you really put her in her place, another student added. Jennifer managed a small smile. She wasn't sure if this was the end of Jennifer's bullying, but for now, she felt a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in a long time. Isabella stormed into her house, slamming the front door so hard that the sound echoed through the living room. Her mother, Olivia, lounging on the couch with a glass of wine, jumped slightly and turned to face her. What is wrong with you? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Isabella threw her school bag onto the floor and flopped onto the couch, her face red with frustration. It's that stupid girl, Jennifer, she shouted. Olivia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Jennifer again? What did she do this time? She insulted me in front of the whole class, Isabella said, her voice trembling with anger. She called you foolish and said Daddy might not even be my real father. She claimed her father rejected you and that's why you're still bitter. Everyone laughed at me, Mother. She humiliated me. Olivia's face darkened, her grip tightening around her glass. What? She hissed. How dare she? That miserable girl and her wretched father think they can talk about me like that? I'll make sure they regret this. They will pay for insulting us. Isabella leaned forward, her face pale with worry. Mother, do you still love him? She asked hesitantly. Olivia froze, caught off guard by the question. Her eyes darted to Isabella, then away. Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. How could I love someone like that? That poor mechanic is nothing but a mistake from my past. Don't you ever ask me that again. Isabella swallowed hard, unsure if she believed her mother. "Then why are you so angry?" she asked curiously. Olivia didn't answer. Instead, she stood and began pacing the room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Let's wait for your father to come back," she murmured. "We'll handle this together. That girl and her pathetic father will regret crossing us." Isabella frowned, still feeling uneasy. "Mother, what are you going to do?" Isabella turned to face her, her eyes cold and calculating. "Don't worry about that, Isabella," she said firmly. "Just focus on school. I'll make sure they pay for what they've done." Isabella nodded slowly, but her mind was racing. She had never seen her mother this furious before. It scared her, but she also felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. Jennifer would finally get what she deserved, or so she thought. Meanwhile, Olivia picked up her phone and dialed a number. Her voice was calm but sharp. "Hello. Yes, it's me. I need a favor." "No, not over the phone. Meet me at the usual place tomorrow night. This is important." She ended the call and turned to Isabella. "Go to your room," she ordered. "I'll handle everything." Isabella's father, Mr. Anderson, walked into the house after a long day. He barely glanced at his wife as he set down his belongings. "Anderson, we need to talk," Olivia said sharply, stepping in front of him. "What is it now, Olivia?" he asked, his tone tired. "It's about that poor girl, Jennifer," she said. "She insulted our family. She called me foolish, questioned whether you're even Isabella's father, and humiliated him in front of the whole class. Something must be done." Anderson raised an eyebrow. What did Isabella do to provoke her? Olivia's face twisted in disbelief. "Why do you always assume Isabella is at fault?" "Because I know our daughter," Anderson replied. "Isabella doesn't back off easily. If that girl insulted her, she probably said something first." "Are you being serious right now?" Olivia shouted. "You're supposed to protect your family, but instead, you're taking her side? You're weak, Anderson. That's why people like that mechanic think they can talk to us however they want." Anderson's expression hardened. "Don't call me weak, Olivia. The truth is, Isabella needs to focus on her studies instead of picking fights. If you don't teach her discipline now, life will do it for her." "Don't blame me for how she acts," Olivia snapped. "If you were more of a man, Isabella wouldn't feel like she has to stand up for this family all by herself." "Yes. Enough, Olivia," Anderson said. "This isn't about being a man. It's about being a parent. You let Isabella do whatever she wants, and now look at the mess she's in. If she can't handle the consequences, that's on her." Olivia glared at him, her anger boiling over. "You're pathetic. You're just going to let them insult us like this." "I'm not letting anyone insult us," Anderson said coldly. "But I'm not wasting my time on petty fights. Isabella needs to stop acting like a spoiled brat and focus on what's important. If she doesn't, she'll have no one to blame but herself." Anderson walked away without another word. Olivia clenched her fists, furious. Isabella, who had been listening from the top of the stairs, came down hesitantly. "Mother, what do we do now?" she asked. Olivia turned to her daughter, her eyes filled with determination. "Don't worry, Isabella," she said. "If your father won't protect this family, I will. That mechanic and his daughter will regret ever crossing us." That night, under the cover of darkness, Olivia put her plan into motion. She called a group of rough boys who would do her bidding for the right price. "I want you to send a message to that mechanic," she said coldly. "Burn his garage to the ground. Make sure there's nothing left of his livelihood." The boys nodded without hesitation, eager to carry out her orders. As the moon lit their path, they crept toward the garage with gasoline and matches in hand. In no time, flames engulfed the small building, licking at the night sky. By the time the fire was discovered, it was too late. Neighbors rushed to help, but there was little they could do. The once busy garage was now a pile of blackened rubble. Jennifer's father stood in shock, staring at the destruction. His hands trembled as he sank to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "Why, God?" he whispered. "Why did you create me only to make me suffer like this? What have I done to deserve this?" Jennifer, who had come running at the news, found her father sobbing amidst the ruins. She knelt beside him, her own tears falling freely. "Daddy, please don't say that," she said, trying to hold back her emotions. "We'll get through this. God hasn't abandoned us. He will send helpers our way." Her father shook his head, his voice breaking. "Jennifer, this garage was all I had. How will I feed you? How are we going to survive? I failed you as a father." Jennifer hugged him tightly. "No, Daddy, you haven't failed me. You've done your best, and I'm so proud of you. We will find a way. I promise. Don't give up." The following day, Jennifer's father walked into her room and saw her still in her pajamas. "Jennifer, aren't you getting ready for school?" he asked softly. Jennifer shook her head. "I can't, Daddy. I don't want to leave you alone. What if something else happens? I need to stay and help you." Her father sat beside her and placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Jennifer, I understand how you feel, but staying home won't change what happened. You need your education. That's one thing no one can take from you." "But Daddy," Jennifer's voice broke, "the garage is gone. We have nothing. How can I go to school knowing everything we worked for is gone?" Her father sighed, his own heart heavy. "Jennifer, I won't let this defeat us. I'll find a way to rebuild, even if it takes time. But you're my hope, my pride. I need you to keep moving forward. That's how we'll get through this together." Jennifer wiped her tears and looked at her father. His strength and love gave her a sliver of courage. Reluctantly, she nodded. "Okay, Daddy. I'll go to school. But promise me you'll take care of yourself while I'm gone." "I promise," her father said with a small smile. With a heavy heart, Jennifer got ready for school. She dragged her feet all the way there, her mind still on her father. At break time, she didn't join her classmates. Instead, she sat alone under a tree, her face buried in her knees. The laughter and chatter of other students felt like noise in the background as she replayed the events of the past few days in her mind. "Hi," a soft voice said, breaking her thoughts. Jennifer looked up to see a boy she had never seen before. He was tall with kind eyes and a curious smile. "Can I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the ground beside her. Jennifer hesitated but eventually nodded. "My name's Sunday. I'm new here," he said, sitting down. He studied her for a moment. "You look really sad. Are you okay?" Jennifer smiled, avoiding his gaze. "I'm fine," she said. Sunday leaned back, not wanting to push her. "You know, sometimes talking about what's bothering you can help," he said. "But if you don't feel like sharing, that's okay too." Jennifer looked at him, surprised by his patience. She wanted to tell him everything, the bullying, her father's struggles, the burned-down garage, but she couldn't bring herself to open up to someone she had just met. "Thanks, but I'm not ready to talk about it," she said softly. Sunday smiled. "That's all right. I get it. Can we still be friends, though?" Jennifer hesitated, unsure if she could trust him, but there was something genuine about Sunday that made her feel safe. "Okay," she said finally. "Great," Sunday said, his face lighting up. "Friends it is. And as your new friend, I'm going to make sure you're not sitting alone during break anymore." Jennifer couldn't help but smile a little. Sunday's kindness felt like a small ray of sunshine in her dark world. Later that day, Jennifer was called to the principal's office. She walked in, unsure why she had been summoned. The principal, a stern-looking man with a frown etched deeply into his face, sat behind his desk. He gestured for her to sit. "Jennifer," he began in a cold tone, "I've been hearing reports about some tension between you and Isabella." Jennifer blinked, confused. Sir, she's the one causing the problems. She. The principal raised his hand to cut her off. I don't want to hear excuses. Isabella comes from a very influential family. His father is one of our school's main sponsors, and I can't afford unnecessary drama affecting our reputation. Jennifer's heart sank. But sir, she's the one bullying me. He poured urine on me, insulted my father. The principal slammed his hand on the desk, silencing her. Enough. I'm warning you, Jennifer. Stay away from Isabella or risk suspension. This is your last warning. Tears welled up in Jennifer's eyes. She stood, fists clenched. You're punishing the wrong person. You're supposed to protect students like me, not take the side of a bully. The principal glared at her. Leave my office, he said coldly. Jennifer stormed out, her chest heaving with frustration. She felt helpless, like the entire world was against her. She walked to her favorite tree in the schoolyard, the only place she could find a bit of peace. Sitting on the ground, she let her tears fall freely. Moments later, Sunday appeared, his cheerful demeanor replaced by concern. Jennifer, what happened? You look upset. Jennifer wiped her tears quickly, but it was too late to hide them. It's nothing, she said, her voice cracking. Sunday sat beside her, his eyes kind but persistent. Come on, Jennifer. I'm your friend. You can talk to me. After a long pause, Jennifer sighed and told him everything. Isabella's bullying, the cruel words, the urine incident, and now the principal's warning. By the time she finished, her voice was trembling. Sunday's face darkened with anger. How dare she? That spoiled brat thinks she can get away with anything because of her father. And the principal, what kind of coward does nothing to protect his own students? Please, Sunday, Jennifer said, her voice shaky. Don't do anything. Isabella's father is a powerful man. I don't want you to get into trouble because of me. Sunday turned to her. Jennifer, you don't deserve this. Nobody does. Someone needs to stand up to Isabella, and if the principal won't, I will. No, Jennifer said firmly, grabbing his arm. I've seen what Isabella can do. Please, just let it go. I don't want you to get hurt. Sunday looked at her, his anger softening as he saw the fear in her eyes. After a long pause, he sighed. All right, Jennifer. I won't confront her. But this isn't over. I will find another way to help you. Jennifer felt a surge of gratitude. Thank you, she said quietly. Sunday gave her a small smile. You are stronger than you think, Jennifer. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. The next day at school, Jennifer was sitting quietly in the classroom, flipping through her notebook. She wasn't in the mood for trouble, but trouble found her anyway. Isabella strolled in with her usual ways, a nasty smile plastered on her face. She stopped in front of her desk and crossed her arms. So, I heard you've got yourself a new friend now. What was his name? Oh yeah, Sunday. The poor ugly boy. Makes sense. You two are a perfect match. Two nobodies trying to act like they matter. Jennifer looked up at Isabella, her heart pounding, but she refused to let Isabella see her fear. Slowly, she stood and faced Isabella. Sunday is better than you and your brothers in every single way, she said. He's smart, handsome, kind, and God-fearing. Unlike you, he doesn't go around making others feel small to hide his own insecurities. Isabella's smile vanished. Her face twisted in anger, and the entire classroom went silent. You think you're brave, don't you? Isabella sneered. You are nothing but the poor daughter of a worthless mechanic. I can ruin you and your stupid friend whenever I want. Jennifer didn't back down. You keep calling my father worthless, but guess what? My father is a better man than yours will ever be. At least he's not raising his daughter to be a bully. Isabella's face turned red, her fists clenched so tightly her knuckles went white. She took a threatening step closer. You've gone too far this time. You'll regret opening your big mouth. Do your worst, Isabella, Jennifer shot back. But just remember, you'll never be as strong as me. You hide behind your father's money, but I stand tall because I have something you don't: courage. Isabella's body shook with rage. For a second, it looked like she would lash out, but instead, she turned and stormed out. A few minutes later, Sunday walked in with a book in hand. He glanced around and noticed the room was unusually silent. Everyone seemed tense. Concerned, he walked straight to Jennifer's desk. "What happened?" he asked, lowering his voice. Jennifer let out a deep sigh and sank back into her chair. "Isabella came to insult me again, but I stood up to her." Sunday frowned. "What did he say?" Jennifer hesitated but eventually told him everything. Sunday's expression darkened as he listened. "That's enough," he said firmly. "This girl has gone too far. She needs to be stopped." "Sunday, no," Jennifer said quickly, grabbing his arm. "Please don't confront her. Her father is powerful, and I don't want you to get in trouble because of me." Sunday looked down at her hand on his arm and then back at her face. His fists relaxed, but the fire in his eyes didn't die down. "Fine," he said after a moment. "I won't say anything for now. But if she ever lays a hand on you or says something worse, I won't stay quiet. I promise you that." Jennifer gave him a small smile, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Sunday." Sunday nodded, but inside, he was still angry. He couldn't stand the thought of someone hurting Jennifer, and he silently vowed to protect her no matter what. Meanwhile, Jennifer's father walked down the road, deep in thought. He had been struggling for days after the fire destroyed his garage. His heart was heavy with worry. How would he rebuild? How would he take care of Jennifer? The weight of his troubles seemed endless. As he walked, a man approached him. The stranger looked tired and hungry, his clothes ragged. "Excuse me, sir," the man said, his voice weak. "I'm hungry. Could you spare a little money for food?" Jennifer's father hesitated. He had just enough for himself and Jennifer, but he couldn't ignore the man's plea. He looked into the stranger's eyes, and something about him seemed genuine. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the last of his money, handing it to the man. "Thank you, kind sir," the stranger said, his eyes gleaming with gratitude. As Jennifer's father turned to leave, the man called out to him. "Wait a moment, please." Jennifer's father stopped and turned around, surprised. "What is it?" The stranger smiled, and there was something mysterious about his expression. "I'm not as poor as you think," he said calmly. "In fact, I'm not poor at all. I wanted to test you." Jennifer's father blinked, confused. "Test me?" The man nodded. "Yes. I wanted to see if you had the kindness to help a stranger in need, and you did. I was watching." He paused as if weighing his next words carefully. "Tell me, what troubles you? What weighs on your heart?" Jennifer's father was taken by surprise. He hadn't expected a question like that. He thought for a moment, then sighed deeply. "My daughter Jennifer. We're struggling. I had a small garage, but it was burned down. Now, I don't know how I will rebuild it. I have no money left, no way to feed us." The stranger listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. Then, without saying another word, he reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He handed it to Jennifer's father. "Take this," the stranger said. "It's for you, for your hard work and kindness." Jennifer's father stared at the envelope, not knowing what to think. He opened it slowly, and inside was a check for an amount that made his eyes widen in disbelief. It was more than enough to rebuild his garage and then some. The check was for a huge sum of money, more than he could ever have imagined. "Is this real?" Jennifer's father asked, his voice trembling. "Why are you doing this? Who are you?" The stranger smiled, but there was a sadness in his eyes. "I'm just someone who believes in kindness. Consider this my way of helping you. I don't need anything in return. Just make sure you do good with this money." Jennifer's father could hardly believe it. He had been given a gift he never expected. "Thank you," he whispered, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you so much. But what's your name? I need to know your name so I can thank you properly." The stranger simply shook his head. "No need for that. I am someone you have once helped before. During the hardest time, when I need the help most, you did helped me. Just remember the lesson. Kindness goes a long way. And when you do well, help someone else in need." Before Jennifer's father could say another word, the stranger turned and walked away. He disappeared down the street, leaving Jennifer's father standing there in awe, holding the check and realizing that sometimes life had unexpected ways of offering help when you needed it most. Overcome with emotion, Jennifer's father said to himself, "God really does work in mysterious ways." He couldn't wait to tell Jennifer what had happened. When Jennifer's father got home, he looked so happy that Jennifer couldn't help but notice. She was sitting at the table, trying to finish her homework, but she stopped and stared at him. "Daddy, why are you smiling like that?" she asked, curious. Her father sat down beside her, still holding the check tightly in his hand. "Jennifer, you won't believe what happened today." Jennifer put her pen down. "What happened, Daddy? Tell me." He began to explain everything, how he met the stranger, how he gave away his last money, and how the man gave him a check in return. Jennifer's eyes grew wide with shock and excitement. "Daddy, this money is enough to rebuild the garage and even more," she shouted, almost jumping out of her seat. Her father smiled and nodded, tears in his eyes. "Yes, my child. It's more than enough. God is truly good." Jennifer hugged him tightly, her face lighting up with joy. "I told you, Daddy. Being nice always pays off. You gave that man your last money even when you had nothing, and see how God blessed you." Her father hugged her back, his heart full. "You're right, Jennifer. Kindness always comes back to you, even when you least expect it." Jennifer pulled away, a playful smile creeping onto her face. "But wait, Daddy. What if that stranger was sent by someone we know?" Her father raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that?" Jennifer leaned closer like she was telling a big secret. "What if it was Isabella's mother? Maybe she still likes you and wanted to help you secretly." Her father's face turned serious, and he shook his head quickly. "Jennifer, God forbid. Don't even say such a thing. That woman. Never. I'd rather sleep on the street." Jennifer burst into laughter, seeing how upset he got. "Relax, Daddy. I was only joking. Look at your face." Her father sighed. He couldn't help but kept smiling. The following day, Jennifer sat under her favorite tree at school, appearing far happier than usual, the bright smile on. Her face was impossible to ignore. Sunday noticed from afar and walked over, curious about the change. "Jennifer, you're glowing today," he teased as he sat beside her. "What's going on?" Jennifer smiled. "Sunday, something amazing happened yesterday." He leaned closer, intrigued. "Tell me already." She shared the story of her father meeting the mysterious stranger who handed him a large sum of money to rebuild the garage. "Can you believe it? A complete stranger just showed up and helped us. It's unbelievable." "Amazing." Jennifer nodded. "Yes, I just can't stop thinking about their kindness. I pray God blesses them for their help." Sunday leaned back and smirked. You know what I think." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "What? Maybe the stranger is actually your secret admirer," Sunday teased, nudging her playfully. Jennifer burst into laughter. "Oh, come on, Sunday. A secret admirer for me? That's ridiculous." A few weeks later, Isabella was caught with exam malpractices, plus bully allegations levied against her. The school authority decided to expel her, with the help of some students, who have been victims of Isabella's bully. They wrote articles and protested against Isabella, and eventually she got expelled. The next day, Isabella's father was sighted on the bed in the evening. He was disturbed about something heartbreaking. "You look upset," his wife said, feigning concern, but it didn't fool him. "I just got a call," he said, pacing back and forth. "Someone told me everything about you, the mechanic, he was your ex-boyfriend, and how you've been threatening him, and how Isabella had been bullying his daughter all along. You even sent thugs to burn down his workshop." He turned to her, his eyes burning with fury. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" His wife's face went pale for a moment before she composed herself. "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Someone's spreading lies about me. I don't know any mechanic, and I've never threatened anyone." She stood up, walking toward him. "You must be confused. I will deal with whoever is trying to ruin my name. You know me." Isabella's father, however, was no longer convinced. He had always trusted his wife, but now doubt clouded his judgment. The call had shaken him to the core, and his mind raced with questions. "I don't trust you anymore. You've been hiding things from me, and now I can't ignore it. I am very sure Isabella took this nonsense characters after you. Just recently she got expelled from school, isn't that obvious?" he added. Isabella's father stood firm, his voice unwavering as he ordered his wife to compensate the mechanic for the shop she had burned down, and to apologize for the pain and destruction she had caused his family. Isabella, too, must apologize to the girl she had bullied, or face the consequences. Before he could finish, his wife broke down in tears. "I'm so sorry, Anderson, for everything," she choked out, her voice trembling. "I will do exactly as you have asked, and I promise never to hurt you again." The next morning, Mr. Anderson, his wife, and their daughter Isabella drove down to the mechanic's workshop. As they arrived, Jennifer's father turned to face them, his expression unreadable. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, with tear-filled eyes, Isabella's mother stepped forward. "I have wronged you," she whispered, "and I will spend the rest of my life making it right." Isabella also apologized to Jennifer with regrets all over her face. As the morning sun bathed them in light, a new chapter began, not one of pain, but of healing. Some of the moral lessons of this story include, but not limited to, taking responsibility for one's actions, no matter how painful, is the first step toward making things right. Isabella's father ensured justice was served, showing that wrongdoing must be corrected. Isabella and her mother learned that hurting others, whether through words or actions, can lead to serious consequences. Their journey to seek forgiveness highlights the importance of treating others with kindness. Despite the pain caused, the mechanic and his daughter had the opportunity to witness genuine remorse, proving that forgiveness can lead to healing and a fresh start. Parents play a crucial role in shaping their children's values. By correcting Isabella and her mother, Mr. Anderson demonstrated strong moral leadership, teaching that love includes discipline and justice. One act of bullying and destruction affected multiple lives. The story serves as a reminder that our actions, good or bad, can shape the lives of those around us. Sunday's actions towards Jennifer made her feel more confident and courageous. Dear viewers, if you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to this channel for more amazing and must-watch videos of this kind, and also as a support to still do more. Share your thought in the comment section. Don't forget to turn on notifications for more inspiring tales. Thank you for your unwavering support. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay blessed.